6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan had won everything it attacked. But the American carriers had not been at Pearl Harbor. They were still out there, and Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto wanted them dead. His plan was to invade a 2-mile speck of coral called Midway. Not because he wanted it, because he knew the Americans would have to come out and fight for it. For it, Japan committed 8 aircraft carriers and more than 200 ships. But Yamamoto split them into 4 separate forces, hundreds of miles apart. A diversion to the Aleutians, an invasion convoy, and his own battleships trailing far behind in radio silence. Of all of it, only 4 carriers and about 20 ships would ever reach the battle. What Yamamoto did not know was that in a windowless basement at Pearl Harbor, a man in carpet slippers and a smoking jacket was reading his mail. Rockefeller's team had broken enough of the Japanese naval code to know an operation was coming. They knew the date. They knew the force. They did not know the target. The Japanese called it, simply, AF. So they set a trap. Midway was ordered, over an undersea cable the Japanese could not read, to broadcast in plain language that its water plant had broken down. 2 days later, Japanese radio reported that AF was short of fresh water. Admiral Chester Nimitz believed them. He had 3 carriers to Yamamoto's 4, and he called what he was about to do the principle of calculated risk. One of those 3, Yorktown, had come home from Coral Sea with a hole in her. The yard estimated 3 months. Nimitz gave them 3 days. So the Americans went where the Japanese were not looking. 325 miles northeast of Midway, at a patch of empty ocean the staff named Point Luck. Task Force 16 was Enterprise and Hornet, under Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, a cruiser officer who had never commanded a carrier in his life. Halsey was in hospital. Task Force 17 was Yorktown, under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, who held overall command. And then they waited. 4:30 in the morning, June 4th. Nagumo launches 108 aircraft against Midway. At the same time, 7 scout planes go out to search for the American fleet. One of them, from the cruiser Tone, is 30 minutes late off the catapult. It does not matter yet. At 5:52, an American flying boat finds them first. The strike hits Midway at 6:30. It wrecks the installation. It does not close the runway, and that single fact decides the battle. At 7 o'clock, the strike leader radios back, a second attack is necessary. 10 minutes later, the first American aircraft from Midway arrived. 6 Avengers and 4 Marauders. 5 Avengers are shot down. They hit nothing. But they force a decision. Nagumo's reserve, 93 aircraft armed with torpedoes for enemy ships, is now needed against the island. At 7:15 he orders them struck below and rearmed with land bombs. 13 minutes later, the late scout plane from Tone finally reports. 10 ships. No types. No carrier mentioned. At 7:45, Nagumo halts the rearming. Torpedoes go back on. His hangars are now a scrapyard of live ordnance. At 8:20, the scout corrects itself. The enemy force appears to have a carrier bringing up the rear. Nagumo now has a choice. Launch a half-armed, unescorted strike immediately, or recover the aircraft circling overhead out of fuel, and send a proper coordinated attack. Japanese doctrine said coordinate. He chose doctrine. It was not stupidity. It was the wrong tool for a situation nobody had trained for. Between 7 and 10, American aircraft attacked Kido Butai 8 separate times. Not one bomb hits. Not one torpedo hits. Hornet's air group had already gone wrong. Its commander flew a heading of 265. The enemy was at 240. 44 aircraft flew into empty ocean and never came back to the battle. One squadron refused to follow. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron broke away, on his own navigation, and found them. Torpedo 8 attacked with 15 Devastators. No fighter escort. No dive bombers overhead. All 15 were shot down. Of 30 men, 1 came back. Torpedo 6 came next. 10 of 14 destroyed. Torpedo 3 came last. 10 of 12. Every squadron commander was killed. 41 Devastators attacked that morning. 6 came home. They scored nothing. And that is where the myth dies. To launch a strike, Nagumo needed 45 uninterrupted minutes, on 4 flight decks at once. From 7 in the morning until 10:20, the Americans never gave him 15. The men who hit nothing are the reason his decks were empty. Above it all, 33 Dauntless dive bombers from Enterprise were lost. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey reached the calculated position and found empty water. He was already past the fuel to get home. He kept searching. And then he saw a single Japanese destroyer, alone, running north at full speed, and followed her wake. At 20 past 10, they were over Kido Butai. And no one was looking up. Kaga took these 4 bombs. Soryu took 3. Akaji took 1, a single 1,000-pound bomb, into a hangar full of loose ordnance. The man who dropped it, Lieutenant Richard Best, had watched Kaga already burning and pulled his 3 planes off to find another target. Maxwell Leslie dived on Soryu with no bomb at all. An electrical fault had dropped it into the sea an hour earlier. He went down strafing anyway. 6 minutes. 3 carriers gone. There was a 4th. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi launched everything Hiryū had left. 18 dive bombers, then 10 torpedo planes, in 2 waves. 3 bombs stopped working. Her crew had her making 19 knots again in 2 hours, so when the second wave arrived, they thought she was a different, undamaged carrier. 2 torpedoes finished that. 3 in the afternoon, listing 26 degrees. At 5 o'clock, Enterprise launched again, 24 Dauntless, 10 of them orphans. They caught Hiryū preparing a 3rd strike. Yamaguchi ordered his crew off and stayed. Hiryū was scuttled by her own destroyers the next morning. In one day, Japan lost all 4 carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. It was not over. A Japanese submarine found the southern part of the 6th USS Hammond broke in half in 4 minutes. Yorktown rolled over and sank the next morning. Japan lost 4 carriers, 1 cruiser, 248 aircraft, and 3,057 men. The United States lost 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, about 150 aircraft, and 307 men. And the loss Japan could least replace was not the pilots. Most of those were pulled from the water. It was the mechanics, the armorers, the flight deck crews who died in the hangars, and the 4 decks themselves. Japan did not lose Midway because a scout plane was late, or because of 5 minutes. It lost because it split a fleet it should have concentrated, and because a rigid doctrine met a morning it was never designed for. 41 Devastators went in that morning and hit nothing at all. They are the reason the decks were empty when the dive bombers came.